And we'll begin today being a special day. We had a Truth and Reconciliation flag raising and ceremony held out front, followed by a barbecue today. It's wonderful to see members of council still wearing orange. I'm going to call on Councillor Olson to give the territorial acknowledgement.
Miigwech, Mayor Halakas. So I wanted to just start off this evening by reminding each one of us that how we conduct a land acknowledgement can look differently. So for tonight, when I'm speaking of the land, I just want to take a moment to recognize that I'm speaking about who I am. It's my identity. It's a living connection to the past, present, and future through my ancestors, my family, my blood, and experiences. And the beautiful part is that we all walk with that. For tonight, I intend on sharing learnings connected to the Indian residential schools and Truth and Reconciliation. Truth and Reconciliation is Canada's mandate to inform Canadians of the history, impact, and experiences of those who attended Indian residential school, including survivors, their families, and those who never returned home. As Mayor Halakas just reminded us, this week has been proclaimed as Truth and Reconciliation Week, and September 30th, next Monday, is Truth and Reconciliation Day, or as some of us know it as Day of Orange, or Orange Shirt Day. This evening, I will not be sharing Phyllis's story, but instead providing an acknowledgement of the strength and resiliency of the Indigenous people who live, work, and provide on this territory. I first want to honor the lands where we gather. Neashing and Bawatagon, these are the places of the flowing or moving water, or how we know it as the Point. Seven Oaks area in particular. We also recognize our river, right behind us to the south, Manitou Zibe, or loosely interpreted as the great spirit of the river. And that river travels from way up north all the way down and actually makes a circular direction back to up north. It's a very, very special river to our people. I also want to recognize and acknowledge Nebe, all the waters we're surrounded by. These lands and waters have been and continue to be a gathering place for thousands of years for the Anishinaabe people. Spaces today where we continue to share stories, teachings, conduct ceremonies, and pass knowledge. Next, I want to honor each and every one of those 6,000 plus students that attended the residential school known as St. Marguerite's, or the Fort Frances Indian Residential School. I want to remind you that this is not an experience of the past, and that today's society is built upon colonialism and genocide. We are reminded of the real and living truths experienced by many of our families. The heavy weight of this trauma is felt by all, those directly and even indirectly impacted by Indian residential schools, day schools, 60 Scoop, and the ongoing overrepresentation of Indigenous children in child welfare system. Lastly, I want to honor those living, including intergenerationally, who are sharing or learning to share through their voice. I want to say, Miigwech, thank you for sharing your stories, even if your voice shudders. It is through this that you are creating space for others, like myself, to take back our power and engage in meaningful healing. Today and every day should be a time of reconciliation. In the words of Gord Downey, do something. Action doesn't have to be grandiose gestures. It can be simply creating the time or investing the energy to make meaningful connection. Our community is full of rich Indigenous history. Here are a few ways you can do so. Go sit on the land, offer tobacco, touch the waters at places like Neashing or the Point. Have meaningful conversation of what reconciliation means to you. Inform communities, tables, boards, and leaderships such as our table of how we can do better as a community. Learn and understand the history of Indigenous people, residential schools, 60 Scoop, and every other act of genocide that's kind of been placed upon us. Visit local Indigenous organizations, learn, address historical injustices, create awareness, do whatever feels right to you. Lastly, and this is just a reminder for those living with these stories, there are many to help. I encourage you to reach out, and if you don't know where to go, please just ask. Miigwech.
Councillor Olson, thank you for speaking your truth. Your words were very powerful, Chimikwich, for them. Going to item number 3, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest, and if so, state the general nature thereof? Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to declare a conflict on item 10.1 on tonight's agenda, which is the swim team pool rental rates, because my granddaughter is registered with the Cyclones Swim Club for the 2024-25 season, something I was not aware of when the Cyclones request initially came to council at our September 9th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Anyone else? Okay, item number 4, delegations and deputations. Tonight, we will formally open our budget deliberations with public consultation. I would also like to point out that later on in the agenda item 9, our clerk's department has done some considerable public consultation and provided us with some significant input from the public as to how they would like to see their tax dollars spent. Right now, we're going to open up the floor, and what I'm going to do is ask for people in this room to speak if they wish. If you do speak, please state your name and your street name. Before I open the floor up for that, we have received written comments. We received some written comments from Natalie Donaldson, who wishes to see some budget consideration giving to safety measures. And we have received written comments from Sherry de Gagne, who again wishes to see some budget consideration given to accessible parking spaces for the Fort Francis Senior Center. So with that, I'll open the floor in chambers. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to the 2025 budget process? Sir, step right up. And please state your name and street address.
Scott Crinky Turvey, Kirsty Place. Hi, councillors and mayor. For those who don't know, I'm Scott Crinky Turvey, a small business owner and citizen of Fort Francis for 15 years. I moved to Fort Francis after meeting who is now my wife, Darlis Crinky, a lifelong resident of Fort Francis and homeowner of a modest home in the town's west end. She built her house about a decade before we met. 24 years ago, when she built her house, she paid $24,000 for property tax, quite acceptable amount for the property she owned and the services the town provided. Today, her taxes are over $7,000. Year after year, we've been told through the media that the rate of increase for the town budget is about 3 to 3.5%. I'm no accountant, but I can do back in the napkin math to figure out 3.5 compounded annually for 24 years comes under $5,300. A significantly less amount than $7,047 that her most recent bill came to. So my questions for you are, just how does the town calculate tax increases? Secondly, can I get an actual increase year to year mill rate for the last decade so that we can find out what's been going on? Third, what does the town intend to do to rectify these out of control increases in the next 1, 3, and 5 years? Lastly, just counting the newer than Darlis's build on Caitlin Drive, Aaron Crescent, and Huffman Court, there are about 50 new properties to share the cost of running the town. That's in the course of 24 years. What is the town doing to attract new builds and improvements to impoverished dwellings to increase tax revenue to help hold taxes down? Just how many building permits and total dollar of those permits have been made in the last 5 years? And what, if any, are the projections for residential build permits in the next 3 to 5 years? In conclusion, my ultimate question is, if the current trend of tax increases occurs, just how our young families and seniors going to afford to live in Fort Francis?
Thank you very much, Mr. Turvey, for coming and giving us your input. Councilors, does anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Turvey? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Turvey. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Please step up. And state your name and street address.
My name is Natalie Donaldson, and I live on Church Street. And I would like to read the letter that I wrote and just add a couple things and answer any questions that you have. So, dear Mayor and Council, I'm writing on behalf of myself and many others who have observed a hazardous intersection in Fort Francis that we believe could benefit from added safety measures. I would like to request that safety measures such as traffic lights, a four-way stop, a crosswalk, speed bumps, school crossing signage, etc., be considered for the 2025 budget. My concern is primarily for pedestrians crossing Scott Street anywhere east of Armit Avenue, but also for drivers crossing or pulling out onto Scott Street. The corner of Scott Street and Crow Avenue is a particularly busy intersection because of the taxi service being right on the corner with taxis hurrying in and out. I've seen them sometimes driving directly off the corner of the lot and people picking up packages. Across the street from that is where the Purelator trucks drive in and out to refill from the back of the Titchborns building. It can be especially dangerous in winter with high snowbanks and slippery conditions. With people parking down Scott Street at apartments and homes, it can be difficult to spot oncoming traffic, especially for children crossing for school or anyone in a wheelchair or mobility scooter who can't see over the parked vehicles. The easternmost intersection of Scott Street that has traffic lights for people to safely cross is the corner of Scott Street and Armit Avenue. However, with the Safeway parking lot on one side, people rushing in and out with little regard for pedestrians, and the relatively recent removal of the sidewalk on the other side, this intersection is arguably not a safe option for people walking. And the lack of crossings east of this point means it is more hazardous for kids to cross Scott Street going to Robert Moore School, the Memorial Sports Center, the Library and Technology Center, the skate park, etc. I can think of no better use of budget funds than to help protect our most vulnerable citizens and work towards creating a more walkable and safe community. Every day in our neighborhood, I watch the kids walking to school, parents and grandparents walking babies in strollers, people using mobility scooters, senior citizens going for walks, and I think about my own personal experiences with walking everywhere. I have witnessed far too many near misses to not bring this to the attention of council. I understand that Scott Street is a highway and that additional traffic lights or anything that slows the flow of traffic is annoying to drivers and an unpopular decision. It is this attitude of impatience that has created an even more dangerous crossing. Drivers speed up considerably once past the intersections with lights. Every morning and afternoon, I walk my son and other students to and from Robert Moore School so that I can make sure they safely cross Scott Street without having to go multiple blocks out of their way, which can be especially daunting in winter in freezing temperatures and through snow waiting to be cleared. I have seen kids try to navigate traffic and almost get hit by cars. While there are some very kind drivers who will stop for us when they see us waiting, there are also days when we're waiting long periods of time to be able to safely cross. The kids have expressed to me many times over the years that they feel there should be additional traffic lights or stop signs, so I told them that I would write to council to see what could be done. I want them to know that they matter to the community and their safety is worthy of our tax dollars. I thank council for considering the perspective of the children and all other people who cross this street daily.
Well, right to council, you did indeed, and did a fine job of it. So you got some really good points in there. Councilors, do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make or share? Well, with that, then we're going to thank you for a very well thought out letter, and every information that we get this evening will go into the budget deliberations.
Okay,
Thank you again.
Can I just add?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, just things that I didn't really think of when I was writing the letter is also that at the arena, that is the bus stop, I believe, for children going to the high school who live in the East End. They get picked up and dropped off there. It would be amazing to have some sort of crosswalk, maybe at the arena, Like, I'm open to different ideas, whatever we think. I'm thinking even if people see lights or a crosswalk in the distance, they're not going to speed up so much. But that is a particularly dangerous intersection that I've noticed just because I live just down from that corner. So
You've always been a prolific generator of good ideas, so do keep in touch with us.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I'm now going to go to folks online. If you're online and you would like to present, please turn on your camera. Is there anyone online who would like to make a budget presentation? I'm asking councilors to help me see because I've got a device right in front of me. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I'll just ask a couple more times. Is there anyone online who would like to contribute something to the 2025 budget presentation? This is the last time I'll ask. Is there anyone online who would like to contribute something to the 2025 budget presentation? This is your chance. And seeing none then, we're going to move on. So I certainly would like to thank the individuals who came in person and presented. And we're now going to go on to item number 5, which are presentations, and there are none scheduled. And item number 6 tonight is the delightful little item, something that we rarely get. We got a thank you letter. Roger and Betty Williams wanted to thank us for the beautiful sidewalk on First Street West, and I'll pass that right back to Public Works for the great job that they did. Under council reports, I feel a little dismayed because this is the first time ever that I haven't had a report. So I'll just quickly go over that and go to Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to begin by, first of all, I have a written report as part of the council agenda, so I'm going to just go over these things sort of as briefly as I can for time's sake. I just want to say, first of all, I attended the AMO conference along with Councillors Burnetta and Mackey, as well as CAO Michaels, which was held August 18th to 20th in Ottawa. Most important for that was the 3 delegations we had, including with the Solicitor General regarding OPP policing costs, with the Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions regarding funding for the CMHA here and the RAM clinic, and also with the Parliamentary Assistant for the Finance Minister, who we talked about the creation of tax incentive zones in Ontario, a change to the current railway taxation model from the current acreage to a tonnage per mile concept, and we also discussed reassessment. We also attended plenary, luncheon, and concurrent sessions on a variety of topics, as well as heard speeches from Premier Ford, NDP leader Merritt Stiles, Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, and Green leader Mike Schreiner, as well as Ontario Lieutenant Governor Edith Dumont. And the annual Bear Pit session, which is always popular, this year featured more than 20 ministers answering questions from the floor. And as a brief addendum, I'd also just want to thank Councillor Burnetta and Councillor Mackey for their input and support as I served as delegation head for the first time. Special thanks to Councillor Burnetta for attending on such short notice. Thanks also to CAO Michaels for his work in preparing the briefs that we presented to the ministers. And I also want to give a big shout out to our Deputy Clerk, Chelsea Gregg, for making all the travel and hotel arrangements so the trip went smoothly for us all. Next up, I attended the RRDMA General Membership Meeting, which was held Wednesday, September 18th at 7 p.m. at the Chapel Community Center. Again, the highlight of the evening was 2 guest speakers. The first was Charlene Gillies, the CAO, I said executive director, but she's the CAO of the District of Rainy River Services Board, who spoke about the, first of all, introduced herself. It's the first time she had an opportunity to introduce herself to the elected official across the district, but it also turns out that she addressed the controversial topic of the decision to temporarily close the EMO ambulance base, which has caused some consternation amongst residents in the district, particularly from EMO and surrounding communities such as La Valley and Chapel, as well as Rainy River First Nations. It's important to note that the decision was made because it was based on the very serious and critical shortage of paramedics in our district, as that is the reason. It's hoped to be a temporary one as we try to alleviate that shortage of paramedics. The second speaker was Dr. Joe Ennett, who gave his take on the doctor shortage in Rainy River. I can say that the RDMA delegates approved a motion to lobby the government to address the paramedic shortage in Rainy River District and the doctor situation in Rainy River. The RRDMA also set the date for its annual general meeting, which will be held Saturday, January 11th, starting at 9 a.m. Although Atikokan is the host community this year, it was decided to hold the meeting in Fort Frances in order to encourage more delegates to attend, with the venue still to be decided. And I also want to thank Councillor Bernetta for also attending as a Fort Frances Council rep that evening. So thank you, Councillor Bernetta. Next up, the Fort Frances Public Library Board met on Thursday, September 19th at 4:15 p.m. The agenda included the transfer of funds to the town for 2023 expenses, the financial and CEO reports, discussions on trunk or treat and the 2025 budget, a report on the creation of a new strategic plan, and a lengthy in-camera update on negotiations regarding a first collective bargaining agreement with the newly unionized library staff. And on that, I just want to say that the board did approve a motion to transfer $160,564.79 to the town of Fort Frances from the Library Board Reserve Fund in order to reconcile the amount owed to the town as of December 31st, 2023. I also like to mention that Treasurer Dawn Galusha did attend our meeting to explain the situation on behalf of the board. I thank her for attending and explaining everything, as well as for all the work she and the Treasury Department staff do for the library. It is all very much appreciated. I also can report that Trunk or Treat will be a go this year on Halloween night in the library parking lot. Volunteers and donations of financial donations and donations of candy are of course welcome. And then finally, I just want to touch on 3 events I attended on behalf of Mayor Halakas, including the Welcoming Week, where I read a proclamation declaring that week as Welcoming Week in the town of Fort Frances. I also attended the celebration of the completion of the new center at 324 Victoria Avenue, formerly St. Andrew's Church, which is now known as HOPE, which stands for Housing, Opportunity, Progress, Empowerment, which was held Thursday, September 19th at noon, and which I delivered remarks on behalf of Mayor Halakas. A light lunch was served, and there's also tours of the newly renovated space, in which I took one as well. I also attended the celebration dinner on Saturday, September 21st at the Sister Kennedy Center in honor of Les Baker and Cynthia Woodland, who won gold and bronze medals respectively in their sports. Now, I do have to make a correction here. I had said that they were at the Ontario Senior Games. In fact, they were at the Canada 55 Plus Games, which is a national event featuring more than 2,000 athletes, and it was held in Quebec City, which makes their accomplishments all the more impressive. So congrats again to Les and Cynthia. And that's my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bien, and I would like to personally thank you for stepping up in my case. I've been off work with surgery and wasn't able to attend some of those events, so our deputy mayor came through. And I believe, Councillor Burnett, you don't have a report? And Councillor Olson doesn't have a report. So with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. So, starting at 8.1, these are the regular council meeting minutes for September 9th, and the recommendation reads that council approve the regular council meeting minutes of September 9th, 2024, and that they be approved as presented. 8.3 are boards and committee meeting minutes, and the recommendation reads that the boards and committees meeting minutes be received as information, and they are the BIA minutes, July 10th, 2024, the BIA minutes, August 14th, 2024, the Sister Betty Kennedy Advisory Committee, June 19th, 2024, the Museum and Culture Advisory Committee, June 18th, 2024, the Fort Frances Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation, June 19th, 2024, and the Indigenous Relations Advisory Committee, May 22nd, 2024. Item 8.4 is an award of tender, and the recommendation reads that report AR-24-0671 be approved by council with administration's recommendation to enter into a 3-year contract with GFL for garbage pickup, recycle pickup, and supply and tipping of bins as specified in the 2024-OF-15 tender documents, and that council approves administration's recommendation to reserve approval of the 2 optional years of the contract, being years 4 and 5, until 3 months prior to the end of the 3rd year, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the corporation and prepare a bylaw as required. 8.5 is a support resolution. Recommendation reads that council approval of report AR-24-0670 will agree with the recommendation of administration that council passes a resolution in support of the application to the Housing Accelerated Fund 2.0 through the CMHA to support and promote housing growth within the town of Fort Francis. 8.6 deals with municipally significant events, and the recommendation reads that council receive report AR-24-0669 relating to the Recreation and Culture Division's Fall Event Series being designated as a municipally significant event, and that council's approval of report AR-24-0669 will designate the Recreation and Culture Division's Fall Event Series as a municipally significant event. Pardon me. Okay. Okay, well, I have to finish 8.6. And just finishing up 8.6, and that council direct administration to amend the municipal powers and duties policy, bylaw 53-23, Schedule A, Section 9, with the addition of the fall event series. 8.7 has been changed slightly, so I'm going to read it off the resolution, which says council approval of report AR-24-0665 relating to 853 Portage Avenue be received as information. And that leads me to a resolution. Recommendation then is, oh, first of all, I need to know if you'd like to pull any of those. Councillors, would you like to pull any of those? And Councillor Brunetta.
Item 8.5.
Okay. Anything else? Councillor Mackey?
8.4.
All right. Anything else? Seeing none. Going to 8.4, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. On page 2 of the report here, the 3rd paragraph, curbside collection of recyclables is increasing. The increase was also anticipated by administration. The next sentence says, council is reminded that the town will no longer be responsible for curbside collection starting in 2026. But this whole agreement is for 3 years with a 2-year option, including garbage and recyclable. So can somebody explain that? So, because I'm not quite sure what we're talking about then.
Who's going to handle that from administration? Manager Rob.
Thank you. So Ontario has been transitioning its blue box recycling program, and municipalities across the province are transitioning in a staggered approach. We were one of the first municipalities to transition. However, when we transitioned, we agreed to maintain basically the operation of our curbside collection program and our depot through transition, which ends in January 1st, 2026. So as of January 1st, 2026, we will still have a program. I'm going to say that again. We will still have a program. However, it will not be operated or funded by the town of Fort Francis. When we tendered this, obviously we knew this was all happening, and the term for the recycle collection portion of the overall project and what was tendered does terminate at the end of 2025.
Councillor Mackey? Okay. Moving to 8.5, Councillor Brunetta.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry. Councillor Brunetta, I need to pause you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, because mea culpa. I believe Councillor Olson wanted to speak to 8.4.
Sorry.
My bad.
I should have yelled into the mic just to stop you. No, I had a question through the chair. So this is like a significant increase that's coming kind of across the board. But there was a piece in here around the equipment limitations, and maybe Travis, you can explain that. Does it make sense to go into a longer contract if GFL could possibly look towards a solution that may lower the costs for front bin, rear bin? Does that make sense, what I'm asking you?
Manager Rob.
I think, thank you through the chair. That's a great question. And unfortunately, I think with the transition of recycling happening very soon, at this point in time, I don't know if GFL would go through the process of updating vehicles until there's some more clarity on who will be handling the recycling and how. Like I said, it's transitioning, and it's transitioning out of our pockets into the pockets of the producer, so the people that make the recyclable products. They're going to be looking for ways to collect, particularly up here in the Northwest, where the cost of recycle is extremely high. They're going to be looking for any efficiency they possibly can to lower that cost. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if, we start to see bins with automated arms, or trucks with automated arms coming in. We may see a change in the provider, right? There may be another provider that comes in that is looking to provide the services. So there's a lot of unknown in this world right now. And I think, we talked internally in my office about term of contract a lot. And that unknown really played a lot into going with a shorter term versus a longer term to kind of let some of those pieces work themselves out, so that we know, going forward at year 4 or 5, does it make sense to do an extension, or are there other players in the game or other factors in the game that we need to consider and go back to the table for an open bid?
Mr. Olson?
Yeah, and I think that's what my thinking was when I was looking at this, because of like year 1 being a 23% increase, knowing it's decreasing over those 5 years. Then on top of that, curbside collection of 18%. That's a significant hit to our taxpayers. So I guess that's where I was looking to see like where the alternatives were, if a shortened contract would maybe move things into a quicker negotiation, something that would benefit the community more. This is a tough one to lock in for this long with so many unknowns.
Thank you. Anything further to add?
Just for, a reminder to council, curbside collection, yes, we do offer the service. We are reimbursed by the producers for that. So, I don't want to see an increase in cost anywhere, but we do receive funding back for the covering of those costs.
And that's a good point to make clear. Thank you for those answers, Manager Rob. Councilor Brunetta, thank you for being patient. You're up.
Thank you. So in terms of the application for the Housing Acceleration Fund, I believe that's what it's called. Yep. I'm totally in favor of it. We need housing. We need many different kinds of housing. I think we need more seniors housing. We need more, housing for professionals that are affordable. So I think we definitely need it. I guess I'm a bit, because I'm on the nonprofit housing board, we already have some rent guarantee income housing in Fort Frances that we as a community own. I continually express my frustration, and the mayor knows this, that we are allowed to only hold so much money in reserves. Our buildings are getting older. They're going to need maintenance. We do not have the money to maintain them how they should be maintained. And it's concerning to me. So Depending on how this money shakes out, and because it's financed through CMHC, I'm assuming it's sort of the same arrangement as we have with our nonprofit housing. So new housing is great. I just think there needs to be a plan in place so that 10, 15, 20 years down the line, we don't end up with these assets that are in such bad need of repair that we can't afford. So just some thought around that for the future.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Firth?
I just wanted to echo a lot of what Councillor Burnett already mentioned, and then just continue on. I have a question about how far the development plan for the Shevlin Green would be. I want to make sure that we keep our flexible means possible, because we need to see where the money players are going to come into that development, and then also make sure that we're strategic. If we are going to get into geared to income housing, that we keep in mind that we're going to need a lot of entry-level housing in the west end of our district, or of our municipality, sorry, as well as like further east. So I don't know if the Shevlin Yard is the exact location, but I want to just make sure we keep options available to us.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Firth. Yeah, it's definitely a very important item. Anything else on 8.5? Okay, then I have a recommendation that council approve the consent agenda as follows. Agenda items 8.2, 8.3, 8.6, and 8.7. Could I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Burnetta, Councillor Firth. All in favor? That's carried. No one was opposed. And then dealing with the two items that were pulled, I have a recommendation that reads that report AR-24-0671 be approved by council with administration's recommendation to enter into a 3-year contract with GFL for garbage pickup, recycle pickup, and supply and tipping of bins as specified in the 2024-OF-15 tender documents. And the council approves administration's recommendation to reserve approval of the 2 optional years of the contract, being years 4 and 5, until 3 months prior to the end of the 3rd year, and that mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the corporation and prepare a bylaw as required. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Behan, Councillor Mackey. Any discussion? Councillor Olson.
I just wanted to see what council's appetite would be to reconsider the 3-year term for a 2-year term, and use the following 3 years as the optional. So it would be 27, 28, and 2029 as optional years, with 2025 and 2026 being committed.
Okay, so you're proposing an amendment,
Yes.
and you want your amendment to read that it's a 2-year contract
Yes.
with 2 optional years,
3 optional
3
years.
optional years being years 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
Have I grasped your amendment?
Yes.
Okay, councillors, we have an amendment on the floor. Does any councillor need further clarification on the amendment? Yes, Councillor Behan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, and maybe administration can ask, what would GFL's appetite be for such a change? Do you think they'd be like it's like that, or they'd like the 3-year one with the 2-year optional? Thank you.
Manager Robb.
Thank you through the chair. I'm not sure I can answer that question because I haven't posed the question to GFL. There may be, the implication where they say, no, we're not interested in optional years beyond the 2-year contract. And, they would be within the rights to do that. So that would be a risk that, council would have to evaluate.
Any further questions from councillors? So then I need a mover and a seconder on the amendment. Councillor Firth moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Olson. Any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Burnetta.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, when you tendered it, were you specific about the length of the contract? I'm just concerned that if we change at this point, will we be in violation of the RFP?
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. So all of our tenders always stipulate that we can award any, all, or none of the tender as written. The cautionary note on it is that, you know, if they do say no to the multi-year, and you know their forecasted 5% per year increase turns out to be 10% per year increase, we're at that stage 1 year sooner.
Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. With this motion, we'll still be in for a 23 and 18% increase in the first year and a 5% increase in the second year, I believe. I just wonder what we're going to achieve by making this change.
Councillor Olson.
I don't know. Just kidding. No, my thinking is like how Travis had shared around the parts that are moving right now with the industry, that is less commitment to the existing system. So if 2026 is ending the kind of current state of recycling and they're shifting into something new coming into 2027, it gives, I think, leadership the opportunity to come back and have another discussion within that year to say, hey, you know, here's the circumstances. Now it's maybe not just GFL at the table. We're looking at the best interest in the community. I don't know what the risk would be. And aside from maybe coming back with Travis and he says, you know, GFL isn't willing to do that. Okay. But at least we're looking at it maybe proactively or from a different perspective of 2026 is going to change within the province of how we're knowing and understanding collection and recycling. So it does give us the option coming into 2027, whether we want to make a move one direction or another, or maybe we're looking at completely different upgrading system that is going to impact the community again. So I feel like it gives the, you know, the cards kind of at our hands, our discretion. We're able to look at it versus waiting another year before we can make that decision of what we want to do.
Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at the garbage collection costs only after 2026, where we have the increases. We're not going to be paying for recycle. So it's a strictly curbside garbage collection issue, I think, that we're looking at. And I don't see an advantage. I'm sorry.
Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm thinking that the 3 years should be fine. Because we've got them locked in for that rate, and we've all seen how nothing seems to get cheaper in life lately. It gets more expensive. So if we can lock an extra year down, I'm okay with that. Now, if there's major changes in how things are done prior to the 3-year contract expiring, if both sides are willing, it can be renegotiated earlier. So it can be brought to the table if both sides are interested and there is a major need to do so. So I think I'm content with the way it's being presented.
Thank you, Councillor Mackey. Any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Bernetta.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Mackey. I think in terms of planning, it helps to know what your costs are going to be, and the longer you can know those costs, the better. I am concerned about what Travis brought forward about, you know, if you take away that third year, they can then maybe propose a much higher increase in the third year as opposed to keeping it where we know it's going to be. So I think I would be more comfortable with it remaining the way that it was proposed by administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bernetta. Any further discussion? Okay, calling the question on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. Which then brings us to the main motion. The main motion has already been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the main motion? Calling the question on the main motion. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. and dealing with 8.5. The recommendation reads that council approval of report AR-24-0670 will agree with the recommendation of administration that council passes a resolution in support of the application to the Housing Accelerator Fund 2.0 through the CMHA to support and promote housing growth within the town of Fort Francis. Could I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Firth, Councillor Bernetta. Any discussion on this one? All in favor? It's carried. No one is opposed. Okay. That brings us to item number 9, which is Administration and Finance Division reports. And 9.1 is the 2025 budget survey. And I just want to make the comment that this is the first time that we've ever done this. And tonight, we were privileged to have 2 members of the public present. But some years we get no members of the public present. And yet, of all the things that council does, setting the budget for the year and spending taxpayers' dollars is one of the most important things that we do. And we really want to be cognizant of the public's wishes when we spend taxpayer dollars. So I was really pleased with the clerk's department when they came forward with this idea to survey, to go out and beat the bushes and get input from our residents. And I'll go to our deputy clerk to see if she'd like to just speak briefly to this.
Good evening, Council. As you may be aware, we've historically received very little input on our budget, so this year we took a different approach. What you see before you is a report on received public input from our citizens between the dates of August 12th to September 16th, 2024. We asked for input and offered surveys online, by phone, and by paper at 5 public town sites, as well as the library, and 3 engagement sessions were also held. Possibly the most compelling are the comments, which we'll be separating and disseminating by departments so they can consider implementation of citizen ideas where appropriate. And I encourage all to read through the results for consideration for the 2025 budget planning. And this was a very successful project, and it would certainly be worthwhile to continue surveying on an annual basis.
Yeah, just before I put the resolution on the floor, again, I want to really thank and compliment the clerk's department for this. I watched this process from beginning to end, and I saw how much time and effort was put out to trying to open up every possible method of allowing the public to contribute. You know, whether it be by phone, whether it be by in person, or whether it be at meeting places in Fort Francis. And as the deputy clerk mentioned, we had almost 300 responses. That's statistically significant. And all of those now, with many, many comments, will be going into our budget process. So with that, I have a resolution that reads, the council accept report AR-24-0666 related to the 2025 budget survey. And the council utilize these survey results as a guiding tool when decision-making for the 2025 budget proceedings. And the council direct these survey results be disseminated to their appropriate departments for their 2025 budget planning. And the council direct administration to incorporate the resident-supported revenue-generating initiatives into the 2025 budget for consideration. And the council direct administration to bring a report during the 2025 budget planning process on website enhancement options to further expand digital services for citizens. And that council consider the top 10 citizen priorities identified through the 2025 budget survey and endorse these as the town's key priorities within the 2025 budget. They being, number 1, infrastructure, 2, safe communities, 3, public health, 4, economic development, 5, long-term care, 6, snow and ice control, 7, affordable housing, 8, emergency management, 9, communication and transparency, and 10, social issues. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Firth, Councillor McTaggart. Councillors, any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried, and no one was opposed. Okay, item number 10 is from Community Service. And the resolution is that, before I read the resolution, I should state that Councillor Behan has declared a conflict and has left the room. The Council received report AR-24-0668 to consider amending the schedule of fees bylaw for swim team pool rentals, and that Council direct the administration to temporarily reduce swim team pool rentals from $86.15 per hour to $73.41 per hour for the remainder of the 2024 swim season ending May 31st, 2025. And the Council direct administration to reconsider user fees for all pool rentals for the 2025 schedule of fees bylaw review to the November 25th, 2024 regular Council meeting. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Firth and Councillor Olson. Any discussion, councillors? Councillor Bernetta.
I'd just like to thank you, Nathan, for taking the time to research this a little bit. And I know it's not maybe as much as they'd want to see in terms of a reduction, but at least it shows that we are trying to be fair. Thank you.
Yes, I echo Councillor Bernetta's comments as well, Manager Young. Any further discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? It's carried. No one is opposed. Item number 11, Planning and Development Division reports. There are none. Item number 12, Operation Facilities Division reports. There are none. That brings us to 12.1. Sorry, there was one. That's quite all right. This one deals with an emergency capital expenditure, and it's regarding the 5th Street Sanitary Lift Station. And the recommendation that I'm putting on the floor reads that Council approval of report AR-24-0672 will agree with the administration to authorize emergency capital expenditure of approximately $125,000 from the sewer and water reserves to fund repairs to the 5th Street lift station as a result of the unexpected failure. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Firth and Councillor Behan. Councillors, any discussion or questions? Councillor Bernetta?
Just wondering, where is the 5th Street lift station? I always
Manager
wonder
Rob.
when these come up.
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. It is a small yellow brick building right behind the water treatment plant.
Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. My understanding, this is strictly an estimate at this point. We're not certain of the cost.
Go ahead, Manager Rob.
Yes, through the chair. Thank you. Yes, that is correct. At this point in time, we do not have true costs. It's going to depend on largely how long we have to have rental pumps on site to bypass the lift station. That's going to be a large portion of our cost.
Follow up, Councillor McTaggart. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, the pumps are part of this cost?
Manager Rob.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Yes, the rental bypass pumps are part of the cost.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess my question is, we're renting pumps. Would it not be wise in the future to purchase some? Because this won't be the last time that we ever need pumps.
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. We talked about this a lot the first time we had a lift station fail. And we went back and forth, and at the end of the day, the cost to us to rent the pumps is not, what's the best word for it? It's not an unruly amount of money. We get the pumps, they work, they're serviced, the control systems are updated and modern. If we were to buy pumps and we don't use them for a period because we don't have a lift station fail, ideally we never have a lift station fail. But if we aren't using them, then when it does become time to use them, do they work? Are all the systems in place? Are all the components in place? And it is one of those things that for the cost to get them from Thunder Bay, they're always there. Atlas Dewatering, this is their business, is being ready to respond to events exactly as this. And, it was, I would say, less than an hour, and Atlas was putting together the equipment that we needed. So, this is the business they're in. They don't charge a ridiculous amount for rentals. It is probably more cost effective for us to just rent the pumps we need when we need them.
Thank you, Manager Rob. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Halakas. Just with moving forward with the 2025 budget deliberations, will we be receiving kind of some sort of update on where all the status, I guess, the health of our lift stations is? Because I remember correctly, this is not the first time that it happened.
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. An excellent question, and yes. But more than that, we talk at budget time, outside of budget time, about an infrastructure deficit and a number that's attached to that. This is the living embodiment of that infrastructure deficit. All of our lift stations are the same age. They were all put in the 60s. This is the living embodiment of the infrastructure deficit right here.
Councillor Olson, go ahead.
Just one last question. So this fix, is this a temporary fix, like a Band-Aid fix, or is this going to create some permanency so that we're not in this place again?
Manager Rob.
Another excellent question. I would love to sit here and say this is going to absolutely fix the problem. At this moment in time, we do not know why the lift station failed. So I hope that changes as we get further into the repairs and at this stage, the disassembly. But we do have, in the same token, an engineering study going on a couple of our lift stations to look at just life cycle upgrades to them. And we talked in that scope of work to look and do a bit of a case study on White Pine that failed during the flood in terms of why that failed and what we need to do to protect future lift stations from the same issue. Fifth Street lift station failed in exactly the same way as White Pine. The biggest difference was the sun was shining. It was extremely dry when Fifth Street failed, not so much when White Pine failed. And so we have a lot of questions that we don't yet have answers for.
Councillor Olson.
I just want to say thank you for that, because I think the frustration sometimes that comes from the community is the things that we can't see that are happening under the ground, or perhaps in the lift stations. I know the building kind of right at the four-way on Central. I've been asked a million times what that building is, and I'm like, that is pumping sewer and water, and we have to have this in good working order. And it's a substantial cost to the community when there's a fail or an error or a temporary fix that isn't working. So I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, but I think it's some real conversations that we need to have at our table, especially I know infrastructure is an ongoing conversation, but it's been shared a few times at various meetings that we can't see what's happening under the ground, but the result of it we're seeing, which is crappier road conditions, and the impact of our sewer lines are aged and our water lines are aged. So thank you for that tonight, Travis.
Any further questions? Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I see in the report that our insurance provider has been contacted. There's a chance that insurance will cover some of that $125,000 cost.
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. We did receive some insurance coverage with White Pine when it failed in 2022. At this point in time, we don't know if we're going to have coverage and what that is going to look like for this situation.
Further questions? I'd like to thank councillors for all those questions, and I'd particularly like to thank Manager Rob for his answers. Okay, seeing as there's no further questions, I will call the question. All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. That brings us to item number 13, which is bylaws. Recommendation reads that the following bylaws be introduced and read, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and become law forthwith. There's three of them. That bylaw 63-24 being a bylaw to approve and authorize the execution of an agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Fort Francis and His Majesty the King in right of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Transportation, for funding of the reconstruction of Scott Street between Reed Avenue and Mosier Avenue under the Connecting Link program, intake 9. Second bylaw, that bylaw 64-24 being a bylaw to approve and authorize the execution of an agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Fort Francis and His Majesty the King in right of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Transportation, for funding of the reconstruction of 3rd Street West between Central Avenue and York Avenue under the Connecting Links program, intake 9. And the third and final bylaw, that bylaw 65-24 being a bylaw of the Town of Fort Francis to adopt a use of corporate logo crest policy. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor McTaggart, Councillor Mackey. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. No one was opposed. Okay. Item number 14th is the notice of motion / motion to reconsider. So just for councilors' information, this was posted at the last meeting. We can now put the motion on the floor. The motion must be moved by someone who voted in the majority. It can be seconded by anyone. Once the motion's on the floor, there is no discussion. It's a straight vote. So, Councillor Mackey, are you moving this? Councillor Mackey is moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bernetta? Okay, so for this motion to pass, it requires 5 out of 7. Calling the question, all in favor? Opposed? This is the motion to reconsider. Let me call the question again then. So, on the motion to reconsider, all in favor? Okay, hands high so I can see them. Okay, opposed? And the motion to reconsider carries. With that then, I believe we put this motion on the floor then. This motion automatically goes on the floor. Do I need a new mover and seconder? New mover and seconder. Okay. So the motion that council approve report AR-24-0583 and the recommendation to remove the temporary four-way stop sign put in place at the intersection of Keating Avenue and 1st Street West, and the intersection be restored to its original state. It is further recommended to paint crosswalks to facilitate pedestrian crossings along the east-west sidewalk corridor and install appropriate signage per the traffic manual requirements and update the traffic's bylaw accordingly. So for this motion, I need a new mover and seconder. Councillor Mackey, Councillor, who had your hand up first? I'll go with Bernetta. Councillor Mackey moved, Councillor Bernetta second. Mackey, Bernetta. Any discussion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to see us revisit this because I think in hindsight, we should be leaving the four-way stops there permanently. If you look at where we have other four-way stop or all-way stop intersections, Fifth and Williams, which is down by the old Huffman School, that hasn't existed in quite some time. You've got Third and Armit and Third and Crow, which is right by Robert Moore School. You've got Third and Frenette, which is several blocks away from Robert Moore School. Fifth and Frenette is the same distance. You have Sixth and Cornwall in the north end where there's no schools and certainly not the volume of traffic. And you have Fifth and Shevlin, which is substantially farther from any schools, being Robert Moore. St. Michael's doesn't exist anymore, so Fifth and Frenette and Shevlin isn't necessary. We have them, that's great. But when you look at the intersection in question, you have 3 schools in the west end, and any pedestrian traffic has to go basically east. Probably 80+% of foot traffic is going east and having to cross Keating Avenue. And so the simplest way is to stop that traffic there with four-way stops so that those kids, all it takes is one to get hit, and how are we all going to feel? So I think it's necessary for us to have that there and remove all doubt that those vehicles are going to or should stop. I shouldn't say will, because Murphy's Law is what it is. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackey. Further discussion, Councillor Brunetta.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I had the same thought, Steve. I read the motion and I was kind of confused about returning it to its original state because I was thinking we wanted the four-way stop signs. And I agree with your point as well about, you know, the four-way stops by former Hoffman School, which doesn't exist, the four-way stop by former St. Michael's School, which no longer exists. So if it made sense to put them in those places primarily because of the schools, it just makes sense to do it here as well. So, and maybe we should be revisiting those areas that have the four-way stops and maybe don't need it now that there are no schools there. So just, I would support the four-way stop. Thanks.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, I've got Councillor Firth. I missed you last time. No, Councillor Firth and then Councillor Bien.
Just a quick question. Could we ask administration, not to open a can of worms, but just to make sure that we're not missing something else when it comes to these four-way stops? Like if we have schools now displaced or moved geographically, like I think there might be even consideration for a couple more on that same street, just further down, like on, I think it's the corner of Holmes. Like I don't want to like overkill, but there must be some kind of standard or report for car count or traffic, because like you said, everybody's moving east and those kids are under 3 feet tall. So I just want to make sure that we're not missing something else.
We can certainly ask administration for information on that. Councillor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to remind Council that administration's initial recommendation was that based on the traffic studies, it did not warrant a four-way stop. And I think it's important to note that the ministry states, I believe it's the ministry that states that four-way stops aren't supposed to be used for pedestrian safety. That's not the purpose of a four-way stop, if I heard that correctly. And as Councillor Mackey pointed out, and I remember the last time Councillor Olsen made some great comments about the fact that just because there's a flashing light doesn't necessarily mean the cars will stop. By the same token, just because there's a stop sign there does not mean the car will stop. It's still the responsibility of the pedestrian to make sure that the road is clear before they walk into the crosswalk. So I'm just not concerned. I'm just still concerned about the effectiveness of it as a pedestrian safety measure solely. So that's why I'm against this, and I think I'm worried about what kind of precedent this will set for other areas, as we heard tonight from Ms. Donaldson regarding the situation at Scott Street, particularly if they take the lights out from Second and Armit down the road, what happens there. So I'm just concerned that according to the ministry, this does not qualify for a four-way stop. And as long as the improvements are done to the crosswalk, as we said initially, I'm in favor of sticking with what administration recommended initially. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bien. Councillor Olson.
Thank you. And I just want to remind council of my initial discussion when this was brought forward in May, and then again, my reminder at last council meeting when Councillor Mackey brought this motion forward, that I think when we're looking at considerations for adding and removing stop signs or means of slowing traffic within the community, it needs to go case by case. We have to really look at the environment of that particular situation. So initially, when the stop signs were put, primarily, we have a four-way in the north end where I am. There's two with the schools in the east end of town. The consideration, I think, at that time probably wasn't to have them there, but there was a motion of the environment changing and children coming into that. I think the other piece too that's important to really consider when we're looking at making this decision tonight, and I'm assuming that Councillor Mackey is bringing forward an amendment, right? Sure. Okay. But with that, the ministry also doesn't look at the children. We're talking about two different provincial systems, which is the system of the Ministry of, Mr. Rob can correct me, Highways Act, Road Act, that particular act. And then there's also the secondary, which is under the province where we look from the place of education. So the two don't directly align. And that's where I think this particular situation has to be looked at, just like Ms. Donaldson shared tonight around looking at Scott Street. We need to look at these situations case by case, and it's more than just car traffic when we're taking these things into consideration.
Any further discussion or comment? I need to confer with my clerk. Just trying to find the most expeditious way to deal with the will of council here, because as Councillor Bernetta pointed out, the motion is just the original motion and it doesn't account for any of the changes. And I sense the mood of council is to make some changes. So my suggestion, the most expeditious way to deal with this is that you defeat this motion. So it's gone. And then we'll build a brand new motion and put it on the floor. And what I'm hearing that you want on that motion is that you want the four-way stops to remain in place. And then in addition to that, you want a report from administration regarding additional stop signs. Is that what it is, Councillor Firth?
Yes, please.
Okay. So let's start then with my calling of the question. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Remember, if you want to get rid of it, you defeat it. Opposed? Motion is defeated. Okay then. I'm going to try and take a stab at this. Council will give me their input if I veer from their wishes. The resolution read then the council directs administration to leave the four-way stop signs in place permanently. Nods. And that council would also like a report from administration, and maybe Councillor Firth, you can help me. What is it you'd like in the report?
I'm looking specifically around school zones. So Natalie Donaldson's or Miss Donaldson's request specifically, but I'd also just like to make sure along that same pathway, I think it's like, what is it? First Street? Keating and First is where we're talking about today. So I'm just concerned about those next two intersections. If I can get advisement from administration on those two as well.
So specifically the next two
Yes,
intersections
please.
on Keating,
Yes, please. No, it would be on first, right?
on First,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you.
Okay, so the resolution reads somewhat like this, that council directs administration to leave the 4 stop signs in position permanently, and that they bring back a report advising council of the, I guess, efficacy of the next two, of the stop signs at the next 2 intersections on First. Have I gathered what? Okay. Is there anything additional to that you'd like in there? Okay, so mover and seconder. Councillor Firth, Councillor Mackey. Yes? Excellent comment. Love having the clerk right next to me. When would council like this report? Councillor Firth,
Does a month sound good?
if that's what council wishes. Yes?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would perhaps go to Manager Rob just to see the timeline. If there is an appetite to add additional 4-way stops, what would be that timeline with his experience? Because I would suggest a longer timeline. We generally don't want to change during the school year. That was the reason or the rationale we put into keeping the 4-way stop sign there. And didn't want to implement change, a month into the school year. We would like to probably keep that same logic that if there are changes to other intersections, that we would probably, look to implement those in September of 2025, right? Like revamp, look at it, implement for the new school year that comes up. So I would ask council to consider maybe a longer time, unless Manager Rob says the implementation of a new 4-way stop sign might take months and months, then we can maybe expedite it. But I would aim in Q1 to get that report at the latest, and then that would give us, 5 months to implement, 6 months to implement. That would be my suggestion.
Councillors, is that satisfactory? I'm seeing nods. Councillor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my concern would be, in this case, we are going against the ministry guidelines and recommendations. They did a traffic study. Will the traffic study be required for these other intersections? Are we going to ignore them as well? If it comes back, and we still think we need a 4-way stop sign at these places. So that's my question, I guess. Thank you.
That can be answered in the report. So the resolution has been modified somewhat, that the 4-way stop signs will remain in place permanently, that administration will bring back a report. You said Q1 2025?
Up to the will of council, but I would suggest
Council's-
Q1 would give us enough time.
Council's fine with Q1 of 2025. Okay. Madam Clerk? Got it? Yep. Mover and seconder? Oh, I got the move. No, I didn't. Mover and seconder. Mackey and Firth. Further discussion? Everyone's clear on the motion? Councillor McTaggart.
At this point, we're voting on leaving the stop signs
Yes?
in place.
Yes?
And asking for a report
Yes.
in Q1.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that's good. You want to make sure you understand the motion clearly. Any other discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? Carries. Opposed? Okay. Thank you, Council, for bearing with me through that. And that brings us to item 15, which is closed session. Council will proceed in camera to deal with, let me make sure I have the most recent. Council will proceed in camera to deal with 2 items. One, an expression of interest for municipal land purchase falling under 239.2C a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. And 2, fire union negotiations. This is an addendum. 239-2D, these are labor relations or employee negotiations, and it comes under 239.2I, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or things. So I need a mover and seconder to move in camera. Councillor Mackey, Councillor McTaggart. Calling the question, all in favor? Don't go before you vote. Thank you. No one was opposed. Okay, council is back in open session. We dealt with 3 matters. Item number 1 was the potential expression of interest for municipal land purchase, and the applicant will be advised of council's decision. The second item was fire union negotiations, and administration will proceed as directed. And I have a resolution coming that we reviewed the closed meeting minutes of September 9th, 2024. And the recommendation reads that the closed meeting minutes of September 9th, 2024 be accepted as presented. Mover and seconder, Councillor Bernetta and Councillor Bien. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. No one was opposed. Okay, that brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. Recommendation is that bylaw 66-24, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Fort Francis, be introduced, read, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and become law forthwith. Mover and seconder on this one, please. Councillor Olson and Councillor Berth. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. No one was opposed. Finally, the one you've all been waiting for, that having reached the hour of 7:21, this meeting of the Council of Town of Fort Francis be now closed. Mover and seconder. Oh, Councillor McTaggart and Councillor Mackey. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Council. Some really good discussion tonight, some really good decisions made.